Thank you for those of you who just joined. I see we've got another wave of people filtering in. We'll give it just 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we'll get started. We'll let some people get settled in. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm sure we'll have a few more people join us as we're here. But first, I would like to welcome you all. I'm looking to make sure our view gets set up right here. I'd like to welcome you all to our Community Engagement Forum. This is a partnership between CCTSI's Community Engagement and the Accords Education Program. And we do these quarterly, and with the intention of really highlighting methods and approaches for engaging community and academics together. So today, much like our last community engagement forum, we are going to take an approach to this topic using a fishbowl approach. So if you were here last time, we got really good feedback from everybody on that approach, and we're going to tackle another topic the same way today. So get ready to both listen and engage. So today's topic, our community engagement forum, is understanding and appreciating the capacities of the community, which has been a theme of our series this year. Today, we're going to tackle how community partners support more equitable data design, collection, and interpretation. So really focused on data today, and how we bring community partners in, and how community partners can really help us ensure that our data is relevant and useful. So like I said, last time we used fishbowl style for our forum. And in short, this first part of our fishbowl is gonna look like a conversation that you might oversee or overhear at a party or a dinner, where academic and community partners are sharing with each other what they do. And I'm gonna step in and maybe ask some questions, facilitate a bit of that discussion, but really this is a conversation between academic and community partners about data. And for those of you attending, there won't be any interaction. You're watching this conversation. When that conversation comes to a close, you'll have an opportunity to engage more. And what we're going to do is all of our attendees will be broken out into breakout rooms with a facilitator, and have the chance to really think about and brainstorm the questions they have for these community and academic partners about the data that they've created, the way they've thought about their data. And we'll use Jamboards to capture some of those questions from the breakout rooms. And then we'll bring those questions back to our presenters today and have a little bit more Q&A from the questions that you all have. So after those breakouts, everyone will move back into the main room, and we'll have a period to answer those questions and proceed through the end of our forum today. So today I'd like to introduce some key people. So we have community partners, Jamie Dominguez, and he is from the San Luis Valley and has engaged with our academic partners for a number of years now. Jamie, I'll let you take a minute to share more about that in a second. Then we also have Lisa Lucero, also from the San Luis Valley. And then on the academic side, we have Don Neese from the Department of Family Medicine, and who's worked closely with both Lisa and Jamie over the years. And then Emma Gilchrist, who's Department of Family Medicine and the Farley Health Policy Center, who's also worked with both of these wonderful folks from the community. So why don't we move into our fishbowl discussion? And I'm going to take just 1 minute to go around if there's anything you'd like to add about who you are, and then we'll dive into the discussion. So Jamie, anything else you want to share about you and your role before we start a discussion?
Yes, I just want to say hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and how important it is for community to understand what data really means and be a part of collecting and then sharing it out back to community. So it's been an interesting ride.
Okay, Lisa, anything else by way of introduction?
Yeah, I think Jamie kind of said it all.
Don?
Nothing to add from my standpoint. Great to see everybody here, and hope this is a valuable conversation and discussion.
Okay, and then Emma?
Nothing else. Looking forward to the conversation and really thinking through how community partners strengthen aspects of research and policy work, especially when it comes to data.
Great. Well, why don't we get our discussion started with just a little history in the beginning of this partnership or these partnerships and how it grew. We'll give people some context. Anybody want to jump in and start with that history?
I'm happy to start, and I can share a little bit about the very first day I met Jamie and Lisa. So we were part of it was a boot camp translation process to focus on prevention and promotion of youth behavioral health. Our team at the university was doing this project in 3 different communities across the state, and I was part of the team working with the San Luis Valley. And so on our first day, one of the kind of grounding tenets of bootcamp translation is to share the data and the evidence with the community members, so that way we can start to plan for solutions together. And so we had, as the academic team, created boundaries for our geographic regions and kind of pulled available public health survey data and other secondary data sources to create a shared learning of the assets and the barriers and the problems. And in our prep conversations, I was saying that I'll never forget the day I was presenting that data, and I kind of looked over at Jamie, and he was just kind of looking at me, looking at the data. And it was such a removed way to enter into a community conversation by just saying, like, here's the aggregate data, here's what it is, when you had the rich experience in the room. And so we really quickly transitioned from saying, and it was a multicultural and multi-age group. And so as we presented different components of the data, we had youth in the room who said, I remember taking that survey. We had adults who said, I remember reporting on that too. And so it just really brought the data to life. And we learned a lot about what the data told us, what was missing. And it was just the beginning of a conversation and what's now been over a 5-year partnership.
Well, so Lisa and Jamie, you were on the other side of that. When you saw that data in the beginning of that boot camp process, how did you react to that? What did it feel like to have that data shared? Maybe how did you move forward from there in approaching that data?
Well, in particular, I think the reason why Jamie kind of looked at Emma a little weird is the school district in our area did a survey on behavioral health, wellness, and overall wellness with school kids. And Jamie had about 3 daughters in school at that time. And, they all told him, Dad, we don't even really read the questions. We just kind of, mark, fill in a bubble. So I think he kind of looked at Emma like, that's not very accurate data. That's really not what kids are going through. You remember that, Jamie?
Yes, it was interesting for me because it was awakening for me to be in that space and then see something that has come across my life that was important, collecting information, and then being able to be a parent and hear that so many things come through, in particular the school district, where if we try to collect information and data in certain spaces, whether the kid is under stress at home or busy or not engaged, how it could be skewed. So to see all, multiple pieces to that, how it's taken, and then when you report out on the facts, how sometimes they could be skewed to, how important it is for us to interact and make sure that this information gets reported back to where it came from, because that's usually where you catch that. If you just collect it and don't report it back to the community where you collected it, you'll never know if there's any discrepancies or if you're being impactful as you want to be in collecting this information. So as a parent and as my first time community engagement stuff with partners like Don and Emma, and even with Lisa as a partner in the community, it just opened my eyes to how important all this information is. And then, along with the other pieces, reporting out, collecting it, who owns it, all that stuff. So it was eye-opening for me that day, because I remembered my kids talking about certain things and then it coming back full circle.
Yeah. And as I understand it, it was shortly after that Don became part of this crew. Does anybody want to speak to how you brought Don into the fold and included him in this partnership? Don, you want to tell your own story?
I certainly can. So, yeah, there was a little bit of transition that happened, and I think this was right as some of the initial work of the bootcamp translation was kind of reaching its final stages. The group that Emma and the rest of the team had worked with had gotten very creative and developed what they called MEB boxes, so mental, emotional, behavioral health boxes, that the intent was there were 3 different versions to distribute these in various venues around the community. And at the time that I was getting involved, the discussion was, okay, how do we evaluate the impact of these, and how do we kind of measure what these boxes are doing out in the community? And another member of our team, Doug Fernald, had kind of come up with some ideas for evaluation, brought those to the group. And I think what I recall was there being a really rich discussion about, number one, what are the right questions to be asking? What are the outcomes that are going to be meaningful for the community there, versus, kind of what we might typically think of from a research or evaluation standpoint. And then, what's the best way to get folks to respond? Because, there's people get, as we've just heard, folks get inundated with surveys from time to time, and we want to make sure that we get those into the right hands, and that it's not burdensome, and that that's actually meaningful for them to participate in that.
Mhm.
And I thought it was really great that the academics did listen to the community. I bet you guys probably wanted like 20 questions on the survey, but you listened to us, what's meaningful to us, what we need to know, and things that you needed to know. So that was great.
Yeah, that's what I remember too, Lisa, is that, there's always more and more and more lines of inquiry and questions we could ask, but really honed in. I think we ended up, it was like a 7-question survey of what was most important for you all to know and what you wanted to know. And then even with the ways that we collected the data, we ended up doing both a paper survey and the option to have a QR code so people could enter it online. And then really relied on Jamie and other community members in the group to make sure surveys were distributed and collected back. And so it was fun to be able to then on our end, once you all collected the survey, do the analysis, share that back with you, see if that was matching the informal conversations you were having and you were hearing people have about the table toppers.
Yes, I thought it was very interesting because we were given an opportunity to help put these questions together. And our first thing that came to mind for me was the kids when they said, well, they don't pay attention to surveys because they're usually boring or whatever. And we were able to put some interesting questions and some serious questions on this box. So it kind of caught their attention, cultural stuff related to our area, about the geographic places there, and then some other serious questions. So it was designed for people for fun and to get some important information that we needed. So it was awesome to be a part of that and be able to say, hey, there's a disconnect between youth, parents, everything in community. So that's what we structured it around connecting. And the big thing to connecting is not making it too academic or boring and being able to throw different information on it. So I was glad to see that we had a say so in what to put on them.
So you guys have been talking a lot about sort of how you decided what data to collect, what was going to be relevant, especially for community. How did you then think about making sense of that data as you started to collect it?
For me, this was new to me, the data piece. This was several years ago. I'm a little bit more savvy now, but it was new to me once it started coming in to see the responses of your people you live with in your community, and how important it is to even how just one question brings up a lot of valuable information around being disconnected, around having the time to have this question asked at a table, at a restaurant or in a barbershop when there's time for it. There's usually not time for questions. We all go through life, but these boxes and collecting that information, how important it was just for one question to be asked, and where and why, and that information to me was very valuable. Not just the answering of the question, but how it was all came together was the most important piece for me, that we created time to say, did you know the San Luis Valley was started, blah, blah, or to say, how do you feel today? The two different things are just so important to be able to ask and make space for.
So in addition to the survey data that was collected, Jamie also collected his own sort of data as he went to the restaurants and the barbershops and talked to the people there. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's just amazing how when you hear, it could just be some multiple information comes from data, different avenues. And for me to be able, not just the survey, but to go and ask my barber, hey, how's that box working out? Sitting down and me seeing it on the coffee table and saying, hey, how's it? And I noticed it was a little, he had like tape on it and it was a little wore out. So I was like, he's like, yeah, well, the kids right away, before the kids come in, you usually see Men's Health, hunting, car magazines. He goes, but this box right away, the kids go for. So the kids would grab it and think it was just like a Rubik's Cube, a big Rubik's Cube or something, but then the parents would get it, and we had it both in Spanish and English. He said, it's crazy to see how that one box changes what really goes on in my barbershop or the restaurant, right away gets to the point, like the parent will look at it and read it if the kid can't. And then they got plenty of time to start reading the question. So to see that end of it too, from the restaurants and the barbershops and people that I knew personally, to see that piece of the data that wasn't on a survey or on the QR code, how it interacted in community. So it's interesting. My first ride in data for sure.
Yeah, I think that really illustrates the value of community and academic partnerships and collecting data, is that we had, we ended up with a really nice evaluation data set and some quantitative findings, but then we also were able to weave in the stories and the experiences of what it was like to talk to another business owner, asking them if they're willing to have a table topper that generates conversations about mental health in their business. And so it just really ended up painting a much richer understanding of the impact that the boxes could have.
I think you're bringing up this idea of what is data, and you thought you were going to collect surveys, but you brought up other things. Can you each maybe say a little bit about what is data for you? What do you think of when you think about data, and how did that change the way your partnership thought about it?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I think for me, every time I'm working with community partners like Jamie and Lisa, I think I'm reminded of the fact that data comes in a whole variety of forms, and that what we often think of in the research community as very hard quantitative data actually brings its own set of biases depending on how the questions are being asked, what's being asked, what's not being asked. And so being able to work with partners to shape those kinds of questions, but also then to actually have folks like Jamie and Lisa that are in their community, that are then also having the conversations with folks and getting that form of data, and getting it in a way that, me coming down from Denver, I would get a totally different picture, I'm sure, as opposed to, what members of the community are able to kind of unlock and learn as they have conversations with people.
For me, data is like a piece of a puzzle between quantitative and qualitative data. Academic data, hard data is like the end pieces. That they're, they know where they go, they know they exist, and qualitative data, like from community, is all the rest of the puzzle. It comes in so many different forms, and you need all this information to finish a finished product. And for me, if you want to see that finished product, you have to take the time and collect all this information, whether it exists or is true or not, but you still need to visit it and try it and see if it fits, because at the end of the day, if you miss that piece, you might not be able to understand whatever it is you're collecting it for, trying to figure out. So I think of data as a big puzzle that you need to revisit all the information, whether you need to or not, and just assess it.
Emma or Lisa, anything to add?
I think initially 10 years ago, I thought data is quantitative data and black and white. And it's with partnerships like that we had, it's so different.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what they've said and really emphasize that when thinking about the impact that you can have from these community partnerships, data needs to be thought of as robust. It requires stories, it requires narrative, especially when thinking about what you want to do with your research findings or how it can translate to policy. Without the authentic experience and the stories of the community members, it's just numbers. But that's the community partnership is what can really bring it to life.
Great. So we've been talking about, sort of what happened here, but can you guys tell me a little bit about how you thought about ownership of that data and sort of access to that data? Who owned your data set? How did you think about who was in charge of that? What did that look like?
Well, from the inception of the programming, we were in charge, the community. I don't even know if it was even a question of, the data belonged to the community, because that was just the whole premise of boot camp translation. I don't know if you had a different feeling, Jamie.
Well, mine's similar. It's just that I realize how important that is now. It's one thing to call out, well, this community collected it, it belongs to them, but then how it's distributed, what that really looks like, because there has to be some accountability, responsibility behind that certain job we did for that certain amount of time. And I think we as community members are responsible. If you're part of any initiative, you have to go to bat for that data, because once information or data gets put out there, they're going to be called on it, especially when there's hard data that says different. Being able to fix all this and change it and make it all align. I realize how important it is for us as community that we do need to support the data too, because the numbers just might show something different, and you'll have to answer to that. So owning it too is really big for me now. And I'm not saying owning it personally, but being able to speak for that and answer it whenever it does come up, whatever you collected, because that's the most important piece to it, not being skewed no more, or fixing it or aligning better. to what really is going on with the information and how it's reported back. You want to make sure that stuff gets back to who you collected it from. So owning it to me is always following it through and finishing, like it coming full circle, talking to the barber, talking to the people that come to my restaurant still. How did that feel? You know, that's what I see as ownership, although readily accessible to whoever needs it, you know, to address whatever we're working on.
Yeah, I think just from kind of a tactical standpoint is, Lisa created a Gmail account for the group, and we all had logins. And so within that Gmail account, there was tracker sheets for distributing the boxes, for collecting surveys. And so it was kind of like anyone could access it when they wanted to or needed to. And then, like we talked about earlier, they were really responsible for the data collection. We supported the analysis, but it was all happening kind of in a shared space. And then, a cool outcome was the opportunity then to also collaboratively present evaluation findings. And we've had an opportunity at a few different conferences to share that data together. And yeah, so just, and I think Lisa's right, like they're never really, maybe we could have been more explicit about it to be like, this data belongs to you. But it was just kind of part of the operating assumptions of the partnership.
Yeah, I'm really glad, Emma, you brought up the aspect of making sure that, not just within the community, but as we were disseminating this to other audiences, involving Jamie and Lisa and others in that, I think was so important. And I think oftentimes they could speak to the context, to the background, what the meaning of the data was in a much more rich and valuable way than we could ever do.
And I never realized how important that piece was, but it was important to allow us to go to those conferences and speak of our data. Because a lot of time academics don't allow you that. They come collect their data and they're the ones flying to, present on it. But you're right, we added a lot of depth to that.
I'm gonna pause our conversation right now. We are right at 12:30 and we are gonna move everybody into breakout rooms at this point. So for those of you who are here attending, you're going to get assigned to a breakout room. Thank you, Jordan and Justin, for helping with that today. You'll have a facilitator in your breakout room using a Jamboard to help with your brainstorming. And in just a few minutes, so this will be short conversations, in 7 or 8 minutes, we're going to come back together and ask some of your questions of this expert group here. Excellent. So I'm going to start by saying I'm sorry. I think we had some technical difficulties and a couple of your rooms didn't have our Jamboards, but I think we've captured some key ideas from across the groups. And I'm going to start with asking our Fishbowl presenters here. There was a number of questions about presenting data and how do you think about presenting that data? What are the expectations when you're presenting data? What does that look like in sharing that data back out? You guys started to touch on that and, having both sides of your partnership involved in that, but what other expectations and how did you think about sort of the products that you shared back out?
I thought it was interesting because I was able to interact with people in the restaurant, not just about the content in the box, but it brought up information about how to communicate with your kids, your family, with each other. So for me to share it out to the people who were actually going through what we were doing was, it was the best case scenario. Like it was genuine, organic conversation about not just the content on the box of what we were doing, but right away automatically addressing issues of disconnection with each other. So for me, that's sharing it out was awesome. It was more organic than anything I've ever done, to be able to have conversations around reporting the information, why we had the information, and then them saying, this is cool. I wish we could do this at dinner all the time, stuff like that. Just seeing the response, why we were doing it and community responding to that on my end.
And I think the great part about it, when we shared back the data, it let community members know that they're not alone and they're facing a lot of mental, emotional, behavioral health issues with their children. And so are a lot of other people in the, Alamos area, San Luis Valley.
For some of the other presentations, I'll probably forget some of the ones that we did, but we had the opportunity, the funder for this work was Colorado Health Foundation. And so they held both a symposium specifically focused on this work, where the 3 communities came together to share and present to funders and other community leaders. And then there was also presentations in state at local conferences, as well as more national and international conferences. And so for those more of the academic conferences, we started by writing the abstract together. And so it wasn't like we just all of a sudden went to Jamie and Lisa and was like, okay, you're coming with us. It started with, drafting an abstract, deciding what we wanted a presentation to be, submitting the abstract, waiting to find out if it was accepted, co-creating a presentation, practicing together. And then the fun part, of course, is getting to travel together and present together, but really making sure that there's that partnership throughout the full opportunity of how you get to a presentation.
Excellent. So I'm hoping you guys can address a couple of our groups also asked about sort of compensation and payment for data collection, making sense of data and presenting the data. Can you talk about either what you guys did or what would sort of be the ideal model for compensating around data collection and the whole process through to those presentations you were just talking about?
I think for me, from a community perspective, I came into this not expecting any compensation at all. I came into this trying to address issues that were going on in my community. But what it did do, the compensation piece, what researchers and a lot of foundations do, is they do give you stipends, because it levels the playing field. They don't expect you to be there for free, and they appreciate your time. And I think that's important, because certain people can get lost in doing the work for free, and then you got to, it balances out, and it's a respectful thing to do. So for me, whether they got us a hotel room or gave us gas stipends, it really made me feel like, okay, I can do this, because some people might not be able to do that, and the information needs to be where it needs to be. So accommodating that, it was a respect thing, and I appreciate how foundations and other entities all use them formulas that they have, whether it's hotel, time, meals, that kind of stuff. I was new to all that too, so reimbursement was important. The learning just snowballed after that for me, from a community perspective, on how to get this information where it needed to go and what they did to get it there.
Yeah, I think it's so important to, to realize that, oftentimes, I'm in conversations with folks about, volunteerism and, people volunteering from the community. And I think that, there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself. But with this kind of work, what it does is it narrows the number of people who actually are able to come to the table. And so, by compensating folks equitably, it allows people to be at the table that otherwise might not have been able to be there. And that's so important.
I think what I heard from our initial part of the Fishbowl was that your data was not particularly sensitive, or maybe not identifiable at all. What advice do you have for navigating sort of legal ownership over data, but also some data security if you're collecting data that's a little more sensitive in the community?
For me, with certain, I work in a couple other realms around addiction, homelessness, stuff like that. I think from a community's perspective, this is probably answering another question too, about how do you know you're collecting the right data, and lived experience, you find a lot of lived experience in community. So you have to trust that these people who are coming to the table for free and wanting to address an issue really have credible stuff to say. And we all are vulnerable in certain data. And I think when it comes from a lived experience piece, we all need to respect the fact that, you know, they know what they're talking about, you know, and you can always create a relationship with this person. Not all data can be reflected without relationships too. It just be, you know, you need to look at it different. Instead of getting as many numbers as you can to verify it, maybe you need to build a relationship with these community members and say, you know what, I truly believe that they know what they're talking about. And then their data they collect will secure that, you know, and you compare it with what you got. And that's how we get through this stuff. And, you know, accountability of the data and where it's coming from.
Emma or Don, anything to add on sort of the data ownership and legal challenges there?
I mean, I think from my experiences, you know, the university is set up pretty well to be able to house data and protect data and secure data. And so we've leaned on having data use agreements with partners, just ensuring kind of all of those processes and protocols are being followed, and having those conversations up front about what the community's expectation is of the data, and understanding that, you know, there's raw data that probably isn't as interesting as look at as opposed to aggregated data and early findings and tables and things like that. And so just having lots of data meetings and opportunities to interpret the data together, as opposed to just coming with a final product. So I think there's ways to work around and within the legal constraints, and still really have a true partnership to analyzing and understanding the data.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Emma. And I think what comes up for me here is making sure that in particular, things are collected and summarized in a way such that, you know, particularly when it's a sensitive topic, that, you know, individual respondents are not identifiable, and that we go through the steps in partnership with community members to make sure that that's the case.
Along similar lines, do you have advice around dealing with IRB issues and thinking about community-based data collection, the different activities that might count or not count as research under the IRB, and how we really lean on some of those assets of the community and navigate that with an IRB?
Yeah, I actually think we've got really good partners at COMERB that are pretty well versed in this, and you know, are willing to engage in conversation about, you know, what kind of data we're collecting, what the purposes are, and, you know, is what are the necessary protections from their standpoint. I think both from a IRB leadership standpoint and also from a staff standpoint, we're really fortunate here to have that kind of support. And it's even gone as far as, you know, in projects where we are using community members as data collectors, you know, they've gone so far as to help design human subjects training that's, you know, community geared towards community members, so that we're not forcing folks to go through city training sessions.
Okay, yeah. We have one more question that came up across a few of our groups, and it was about trying to make data more accessible. And it came up in two ways. One was around not having the data be overwhelming to community, and the other was more around technology and some of the tools that might make data actually more accessible. So what thoughts do you all have on that?
For me on that, when we first started running certain surveys, and this is not just this initiative, but others, the data right away automatically was skewed for me because there were certain populations we couldn't reach, like elderly who didn't know how to run an online survey, or people who couldn't be reached with the paper survey. So it's very important, you know, to look at them pieces, because we're missing a lot of information when it comes to surveys and how they're presented. It was interesting for me.
Lisa, Emma, Don, anything else to add on accessibility?
I mean, I think, you know, partnering, I'm not great at this, but I have people who are better at it on my team, at like data visualization and sharing back data in kind of interesting and creative ways, help it become more accessible. You know, a table or a figure can be good, but we can also kind of load it up and it becomes like too dense to look at. And so really trying to parse out the data, share the most relevant data points, whether it's creating an infographic or a map, or, you know, just using some different data visualization techniques to make it accessible.
Yeah, and that's another thing where doing that in partnership with folks to make sure those visualizations, you're capturing the right things, and that's really important and fun.
Lisa, anything to add there?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. We had one more question that came up around ensuring that we capture representative data. So I'd love to hear from you how you thought about capturing that data in upstream, and maybe how that's applied to some of your other partnerships to capture data within the community.
So the upstream bootcamp translation team was kind of made up of the people. I mean, it looked like our community. So they worked their sphere of influence to get the boxes out, get the surveys done. So that was one way that we addressed that.
I think even reaching populations that we knew would avoid this initiative and able to get them to stop and look at this because of who we were, because it came from a known or familiar face in the community. We were able to get people interested in this work.
Jamie and Lisa both just said it better than I could, but relying on community partnerships for that data collection, you know, we talked a little bit about it earlier, is you're just going to get a more authentic story and true story.
Yeah. Lisa, not to put you on the spot, but I'd love to hear, I know you've been leading our team for the SEAL initiative as well, and thinking about what are some things you've maybe done to capture that representative data in the San Luis Valley for that project also.
Exact same thing when I was able to hire data collectors. I wanted them to represent different types of Latinos in the San Luis Valley. We're not one size fits all, from different geographic regions. And, you know, get data from the population that looks like our population.
That's great. All right, well, we are coming close to the end of our forum. Before I close out, Lisa, Jamie, Don, and Emma, any last comments or anything else you'd like to share about data, how communities support data, quality and access and rigor in our community partnerships?
Yeah, I'd like to there was a question that was asked in my breakout room about how other researchers or other people can access this data and you know, maybe analyze it differently. And for me, I can't speak on the research team's behalf, but from a community perspective, it's easily just to find out partners associated and do your own research and talk to people personally, and then hash out any kind of information you get, because that's basically what data is to me, is you you make sure you get to the right people who were part of it, and unless it's confidentiality stuff, I don't think why it wouldn't be available for other people to look at it, because that's what we're here for to do, is to do this together, be able to learn from each other and be able to access what we never were able to access before in different ways.
Great.
Yeah, I have learned to think about data as it's really it's not about getting the answer, but I kind of think of it as like, so my daughter does a lot of water sampling in streams and lakes and stuff, and you're dipping in, you're getting a sample, and then you're looking at that with the community, and so it's another part of the conversation.
The only thing,
No, go ahead,
Oh,
Lisa.
the only thing I would like to add is with the project that we worked on, the research team became a part of the community, and the community became part of the research team. So that's how you know it was true community engagement.
I feel like we should end it there. That's such a great high point to end it on. But I will say one thing is just all those characteristics of data that you shared in your question, Sarah, related to quality, rigor, all of that is possible with community partnership. And so it sometimes takes a different approach than what we're used to, or following a different workaround or a different form, but we can have that level of quality data in community partnerships.
That's excellent. Well, thank you, all four of you, for taking the time to share your expertise and have this discussion. As we wrap up today, I want to first say that this forum will be available on the Accords Education website. So if you want to share this discussion with anyone else, it should be there in the next few days. Second, we ask that you please fill out our evaluation, help us learn how to do better, and tell us how we've been doing. Jordan has just put that in the chat. So please, before you jump away, click on that link and share your thoughts with us. And then we hope that we will see you again next quarter as we continue to explore understanding and appreciating the capacities of community in our community engagement forum. So thank you all so much and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.